record. And I'd love to welcome first guest speaker of the evening. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. I am super psyched that you are here. And I will let you run the meeting however you'd like to. I don't know if you want to take questions as you go or just wait to the end, or this is up, now it's up to you.
Okay.
Handing it
Thanks,
off.
Amanda. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me. So let's do this. Let me talk for 3 to 5 minutes. I'll keep it brief, give you some background, and then we'll open it up to questions and go wherever you'd like to go. The Zoom format seems to work really well. The only thing is you don't get the same personal feedback as you do when you're in a house party or a face-to-face meeting. So if I answer a question and I don't give you enough, just say that and I'll try and expound on whatever I was saying. I am seeing the Brady Bunch in front of me, which is always kind of fun. I happen to be on a second floor of our house looking at our barn, which is on a hill behind the house, and I've got a goat staring at me. So it's just a typical New Hampshire campaign event. So I am Andrew Volinsky. I'm on the Executive Council representing District 2. This is my second term on the council. I'm running for governor to fight for fairness across our state, regardless of zip code. And I think of it in terms of education equity, healthcare is a basic right, climate justice, and in particular these days, I'm thinking a lot about income inequality. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then we can talk more about those 4 areas or go further. So I am generally known as the Claremont school funding lawyer. I was the lead lawyer in the school funding cases that happened in the 1990 to early 2000 timeframe. Since then, I've represented Dover in a school funding case, and with my friends John Tobin and Doug Hall, we've done 60 to 70 forums around the state explaining how school funding works, that people could understand and implement that learning in their election choices, because too often we found that people were voting for candidates who worked against the community's interests, particularly in the area of education. I'm not a typical lawyer. I don't come from a family of lawyers. My dad was a mechanic. I'm one of 4 kids. I'm the only one to go to college. I went to college on a scholarship, and I recognize what a difference my educational opportunities have made in my life. My wife, Amy, and I, Amy's also a lawyer. We've lived in New Hampshire for almost 38 years. We have 3 grown children pursuing careers in education, in social work. Our youngest works for a tech startup. Our middle child, who's the social worker, lived in Brooklyn, and we brought her home 5-6 weeks ago. So she's practicing her therapy practice through telemedicine from New Hampshire, even though all of her clients are in New York. These times really are, it's both a point of concern and a point of opportunity. You know, the arguments that many of us have made about the impact of income inequality are laid bare now with the COVID crisis and people losing their jobs and not having any resources to fall back on. Our arguments for access to healthcare, because we're all in this together. COVID-19 makes that case better than any politician could. And I think it gives us an opportunity to envision a different New Hampshire, a better New Hampshire, informed by these difficult experiences that we're going through now. one thing I'll say about our campaign, Irene's our campaign chair, our campaign manager rather. She's doing a great job. We're trying to live our values in the campaign, so we don't take corporate PAC money. New Hampshire has a way to circumvent campaign finance laws by utilizing LLCs. We're the only campaign that's never sought to do that and never taken corporate PAC money. It makes us different than the other Democrat and gives me the ability to go after Sununu on those points. I'm also the only candidate opposed to the Granite Bridge pipeline that's projected for Stratham to Epping, where big tanks will be built, and then from Epping to Manchester. I don't take fossil fuel money, and I'm opposed to the construction of new fossil fuel infrastructure. Again, that's a clear distinction between the other Democrat and Chris Sununu and me. I opposed the Northern Pass project, the Eversource project. Chris Sununu has taken over $100,000 from Eversource. And it gives me a point of view just from which I can challenge Chris Sununu. The other thing I'll say is that with my focus being on fairness, I think a lot about what happened in the 2008 Wall Street bailout crisis and how many New Hampshire working people were just starting to get back to the 2008 levels because the bailout was so tilted towards Wall Street. I'm worried that Chris Sununu is going to try and do the same thing and give advantages to his Sununu insiders with a non-transparent, personally controlled distribution of the $1.25 billion in CARES Act money. And I've raised that issue with him on a number of occasions, so far to no avail, but there are a couple of things coming on that front that I think will help us. So let me pause at this point and open it up to questions, and I'm happy to go wherever you like. I can see Amanda trying to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, so everybody has been unmuted, so if you have a question, please just say it.
And hi, Sue.
Hi.
Eric, I was like, Eric are you not unmuted, Eric? Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Yes, I am. I didn't want to jump in front of anybody or start talking at the exact same time. So anyway, so I'll start as the treasurer of the group and the local CPA. I'll ask, are you taking the pledge or not? And second part of that question is any changes to the New Hampshire tax code that you feel are warranted?
Yeah, so I am once again the only candidate in the race that refuses to take the pledge. I've worked too long, too hard on school funding to take the pledge, which is a promise to accomplish nothing on the most important issue, one of the most important issues that I think we face. I think the focus needs to be on reducing the burden of the local property tax, which is an unending burden. You know, many people have lost their jobs, lost their income, seen reductions in their income, yet their property taxes come due as if nothing happened. That's the problem with property tax. And so there are other more elastic, more responsive ways of raising revenue in New Hampshire, and we should be talking about them, and they should be on the table for discussion.
Do you have any questions before I start asking?
That made all of us very nervous and quiet.
Which part?
I just think that it's something that we've watched a lot of people say, but it just seems to be the kiss of death in New Hampshire. It makes me nervous because I so desperately want a wonderful governor sitting in the...
So we've had wonderful governors.
Mm.
And they haven't addressed school inequities
Yep.
because they've taken the pledge. And so we can elect good people over and over again and not change anything. And I think the time to make the change is now. You know, as I mentioned with other topical areas, COVID-19 has made our shortcomings more real and concrete. And you can't be any more direct than what's happening with remote learning. In some places that are well funded and have computer equipment and well-educated parents, kids are doing marvelously at their remote learning. But I'm talking to people who don't have Wi-Fi and therefore can't do internet access from their home. They're driving their kids to school, sitting in the parking lot so they can work off the school's Wi-Fi. Some of them can't afford the drive to school. That's happening in our New Hampshire, and it's
And
not right.
I think that I absolutely agree with you 100%. I understand that. I think that for me personally, it's just like, as much as you might be right, it's scary because it is such a deeply rooted part of what we are and who we are. And so that messaging has to be so big and so clear and so obvious. And of course, you know, I think if you look at who the Democratic Party just chose for our presidential candidate, we're not super comfortable with a lot of change right now. We went really boring and really safe.
So I just had this discussion with someone, and I'm
Good.
not picking on you.
No, that's fine.
Someone made that same argument to me. How could you advocate for big change when we just chose Joe Biden as the party's nominee? And my answer is, we didn't choose Joe Biden. South Carolina did. New Hampshire chose Bernie and Buttigieg and almost Klobuchar. Biden didn't even show up on the scale here. And so we have a population that is ready for big, bold change. We've been listening to Warren and Sanders, and to some extent Booker and Buttigieg. And what do they talk about? Everybody is a progressive. That's how you win in New Hampshire. And I think to have a real progressive run makes a difference. And that, look, this is about people paying their fair share. So I'm the one who will make Sununu defend the fact that his friends don't pay their fair share. Waterville Valley has one of the lowest education property tax rates in the state. I figured it out once. I think that the spending per child in Waterville Valley is something like $40,000 per kid, and they get there at a $2 tax rate. In Claremont, the tax rate's $25, and they barely spend the average. Guy like Mitt Romney, who I happen to have gained more respect for in the last 6 months than I ever had, he's got a big old mansion, $10 million mansion in Wolfboro. He pays a $6 tax rate on that mansion. And in Claremont, they pay 4 times as much. People need to pay their fair share, and that's got to be our argument. And we can't keep shying away from the argument that we're in this together and that having an educated population helps all of us broadly. And in order to get there, we have to educate everyone. Let me give you one last statistic. 77% of the children in this state, 77%, live in communities with below average property values. That means more than 3/4 live in communities with above average tax rates. That's not a bad base to start from, if we can make the point to them that that's what they're suffering under.
The situation is heightened a little bit more actually by COVID. I think some of the inequalities will be sort of thrown in people's faces as they look at their tax bill at a time when they have lost their job.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
So this time of crisis might be the best time to deal with the pledge issue.
And let's also remember, you have to be of a certain age to know of the pledge and to worry about it. And there are more and more people coming to our state who hopefully will be voting that aren't of that age and aren't concerned about what Bill Loeb and Mel Thompson believed 30 years ago.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you made a statement about that lots of ways to raise money. Can you give us some ideas about what you're thinking about?
Well, I start with the fact that the governor needs to be the collaborator in chief. So you have to work with the legislature on this. I think you make the argument that the property tax burden is too high on middle and working class folks. The goal has to be to reduce their property taxes. You start there and then you look at the alternatives. You could do a statewide property tax. You could talk about an income tax. You could talk about a sales tax. These have pros and cons that should be discussed and debated. But if you take the pledge, you can't have this discussion because they're all off the table. And I want them on the table because that's the only way to keep property taxes from going up on working people and middle class people.
Thanks.
Yeah. Who else? Are people paying attention to the Granite Bridge project that's not far from you? Right along Route 101?
Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, it's Liberty Utilities project. Liberty Utilities is a smallish gas and electric utility in New Hampshire. It wants to build a pipeline from the seacoast in the Stratham area to go to Epping and then build huge tanks in Epping where it will store fracked natural gas and then deliver it as needed through a second pipe from Epping to Manchester.
And for those of you who haven't been following it, the fun part is that that's going to run right through the junction of Route 125 and Route 101.
Yep.
That's about 9 miles south of us, but you're not even going to get access to the gas. They're not going to pipe that gas up to Lee, New Hampshire.
It's going to go to the north-south pipeline that already exists at Manchester.
We aren't going to see it.
You're right. So there are a number of problems with it. One is it's fracked gas, which produces methane, which is 80 times more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide. It's a project that will have a 20 to 30 year payoff, which in a time when we're learning from science that we have 8 to 10 years to bend the curve on carbon, 20 or 30 year payoff means we're committed to something that makes matters worse. Beyond that, Liberty Utilities has no experience building a project this big. And the Public Utilities Commission staff this winter came out with a report concluding that we have plenty of natural gas in New Hampshire, that we don't need the extra capacity. So it's a profit-making venture by Granite Bridge. And it's one that my opponent, Dan Feltus, has signed on to. It's probably one of the, well, that and the pledge are the clearest distinctions between the two of us.
I have a question.
Yes.
Isn't there some level of danger of leakage of these tanks? And could that impact the groundwater in Epping?
I think there's danger of leakage in the tanks and the piping, but I don't know that it causes a groundwater danger.
Okay.
I think it's more an ignition danger.
Okay. Well, I mean, how close is it to public, like public schools and that sort of thing in Epping? How close would those tanks be?
It goes right near West Epping. So there's, this is where Naomi was running for office.
Right.
And I happened to have canvassed West Epping for her. So there are bunches of homes, and I think one child care facility.
It's not far from the high
less than a
school.
mile of.
Not far from the high school. Well,
Yeah.
that just seems like a really bad idea.
Oh, yeah.
Mainly, well, for lots of reasons, but
Yes.
a safety reason is always a good reason. If it's, something that could impact people's safety, you should do it. Yeah.
It also basically parallels the lamprey.
Oh,
Ooh, not good.
Right.
Of course, they protect you by mixing the gas with a noxious agent called mercaptan, and that's what you smell when you smell natural gas. Natural gas otherwise doesn't have a smell. And what's going to happen is that every time you drive down Route 125, Brickyard Square, you're going to smell it. And you're going to get to the market basket at Brickyard Square, and you're going to say, gee, I have this terrible headache. Where did that come from? And that's where it's going to come.
Yeah.
Well, that shopping plaza is going to smell like spoiled eggs.
Ah,
Have they weighed in on that issue?
On the smell?
Yeah.
So the approval of that kind of project happens in two stages. The first is mostly on the economics at the PUC, so the ability of the utility to fund the project and the impact on ratepayers. And then the second part is the site evaluation committee. I think the smell aspect is a second part, and they're not quite even finished with the first part. Actually, they had to suspend the proceedings in the first part at the PUC because the staff concluded that Liberty couldn't handle a project of this size, and there's plenty of capacity already. So Liberty asked for a timeout, and the thing is left so that Liberty's going to come back when they're ready to respond to the staff's concerns. And that time's indefinite.
Did the staff concern include the smell?
I don't think it did. I think that's more the second tier analysis at the SEC. But I'm doing that off the top of my head. I was one of the lawyers involved in the Northern Pass case, and I'm trying to remember the details of what the SEC can look at. I opposed Northern Pass. I represented some of the interveners against that project, which again gives me a good purchase from which I can challenge Sununu because he's taken $100,000 from Eversource. And my opponent in the Democratic primary quietly supported that project. So again, another point of difference for us and why I think I'm much stronger on climate action. There are also some things I would do if I'm elected right away on climate action. There's a part of the governor's office called the Office of Strategic Initiatives. That's now kind of a dumping ground for Sununu. I would rename it the Agency for Climate, Energy, and the Environment. And its first task would be to compile a citizen-informed climate action plan for all state departments in New Hampshire. and get us all on the same page. Because when you name something, you can better deal with it. And we need to deal with climate problems now.
Mhm. Agree.
Income inequality, real quickly, because I need to jump off at 7:45. I'm a $15 an hour guy, and I make no bones about it. The Senate, before the virus hit and got suspended, passed a bill for $12 an hour.
Right.
There is a national brand that has been built around $15 an hour. And quite frankly, here, that's probably not enough for a minimum wage. But I can tell you, no one in the country is fighting for 12. And there is no point in censoring yourself before you get to the discussion with the governor. And that is the Senate's approach over and over again. It happened on school funding. The last budget battle, the House was $70 million more for school funding than the Senate. When they conferred, Mary Jane Wallner, fortunately, kept 45 of the $70 million difference. And then Sununu agreed eventually and took credit for it all, even though he'd opposed it, and later went around with these big checks. We need to call him on the fraud that he is. He's got a long record of saying one thing and doing another. He claims to be supportive of the environment, yet he appointed an incompetent nominee to head the Environmental Services Department, one who I was able to cross-examine, and they withdrew his name because he was so bad. Sununu pretends to support public education, but he's the one who put Frank Edelblum in place.
Yeah.
Now, Sununu, who claims to be supportive of the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion, he's nominated Eddie Edwards to be the head of the Office of Professional Licensing, which includes all of our healthcare licensees. And Edwards opposes the ACA and Medicaid expansion. I'll give you one more. Sununu is such a fraud on Planned Parenthood and reproductive rights. He claims to support it, yet he nominated Gordon MacDonald to be the Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court. And MacDonald has a 30-year documented history of opposing reproductive rights. And I am proud to have stopped that nomination despite all the grief I got from fellow lawyers in the state. So I'm ready to go after Sununu.
Sununu's a piece of work.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, how are you?
All right. Good to see
Good
you.
seeing you.
Everybody knows our House Speaker.
I barely recognized him. He stood a little far from the razor this morning.
Well, you look so good with a beard. I decided to grow one. If I look as handsome, it doesn't work.
I think it looks charming.
Thank you. Hi, Amanda.
Steve,
Hi. Andrew, I know you have to get off in 5 minutes, and Steve has such great timing. I was wondering, how would you be handling the virus and the communication with other branches of government and the public? If you were in Sununu's shoes, how would things feel different?
You're asking me that?
I am asking you that, yeah.
Okay. I wasn't clear if you were talking to Steve or not.
Well, when I become governor, oh, I'm sorry.
There are enough people.
Why I called in early.
So I can give you concrete examples. Our last in-person council meeting was March 11th, the day the pandemic was declared. At that council meeting, I was raising with my colleagues and with the governor the need to talk about school closing, the need to talk about declaration of an emergency, how we would meet during an emergency and what the governor's emergency powers were. Sununu had just gotten off the phone with Mike Pence, and he told us schools are not going to need to close, and it's going to be like the flu, and started joking about the next council meeting, which would be hosted by George Kapatis, and what we would have for breakfast at that meeting. And I started just talking over him to his lawyer, nice young guy named John Formella, and essentially dictating to John, here's what you need to be thinking about so your boss knows what he can do. So I was on top, paying attention to public health authorities from other states, some of which were Republican states like Ohio, who are on top of the pandemic. I would be more open and honest about the lack of testing and the implications of not having broad testing. I would be more careful in the declaration of what are essential services and what are not. I would never close down a state service like Cannon Mountain so that my family's Waterville Valley ski resort could stay open and take advantage of the loss of competition, which is exactly what Sununu did until Irene and I called him on it that afternoon. So those are pretty extreme differences. And Steve, I hope, is going to talk about the Gopher Committee. I would never engage in the abject power grab that Sununu is doing to try and control by himself the distribution of that 1.25 billion in precious aid that our state needs, and that legislators and counselors from both parties should be involved in helping to disperse in a fair, honest, open, transparent way. But
Can I add a quick piece, just quickly? Today, the governor announced the membership of his commission to determine when we're going to reopen the state. The list of people that he appointed is overwhelmingly his political cronies. There is one healthcare professional, Bill Marsh, a Republican, who is on that commission. Bill Marsh, this Republican, pointed out that the governor failed to appoint an epidemiologist to that commission.
it's troubling. So, but other than those things, probably be very similar.
Sure. Do we have any other final questions or thoughts for Andrew?
Okay, I'm going to say thank you so much. Steve, I
Thank
take it
you.
you have not received a ruling yet on the
No, not yet.
litigation? Okay,
Nothing
so
yet.
you'll talk about what that involves.
Yeah.
I thank you all for coming out tonight. It's wonderful to see you, if only by Zoom. And I hope that we will see each other in person again soon. Thank you.
Great.
I'm going to sign
Thank
out
you, Andrew.
Thank you.
and go to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Good
Good
luck.
seeing you, Andrew.
Bye, everyone. Be well.
All right, excellent. Okay, Irene and Andrew are gone. All right, so next up, as you've already assumed, we have the speaker on, and he's going to give an update on all things State House related. Feel free to pick his brain, but I told him we would focus on the House and the Senate meeting and the state of the lawsuit. So with that, Speaker, the floor is yours.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you. As you know, the Senate President, myself, and Representative Mary Jane Wallner and Senator Lou D'Alessandro filed suit against the governor. And the genesis of that suit is, for the past 40 years in New Hampshire, when money comes into the state, it goes through the fiscal committee. And when an expenditure is made, it once again goes through the fiscal committee for approval. Like our state constitution, our state budget really is a living document. People think, well, we come in the first semester, we pass the budget, and then it goes on a shelf, and we don't even think about it. But it's in use all the time because money is coming into the state from federal government and other sources, and it's also going out in expenses. And that's why the fiscal committee was formed by the House and the Senate to look at these issues, because the legislature was not always in session and not always available. In the last 30 years or so, we've had two other governors declare emergencies. Governor Benson declared an emergency in early 2002, I think it was, and Governor Lynch in 2005, after the Mother's Day floods. Now, on both occasions, federal relief funds came into New Hampshire, and both governors went through the fiscal committee to not get specific approval on what the money was going to, but overall a review of where it was going and why. And so there'd be some accountancy and there'd be some openness and transparency about what was happening. When the governor received this money, the $1.25 billion from Washington, he sent an email to, not an email, but a letter to Representative Wallner saying, technically, I don't need to come before the fiscal committee, but I will anyway. And I'm coming under, I think it was RSA 9, which is the governor's emergency powers. And as the legislative budget assistant who oversees the nonpartisan LBA told Mary Jane, there's only one RSA that you can take money in or spend money, and that's RSA 14. So the governor purposely used the wrong RSA. And so Mary Jane wrote back and said, we can't have this on our agenda. You've used the wrong state law. Well, the governor just ignored it, and he knew what he was doing. So we filed this suit. But before doing that, I talked to the governor on two separate occasions, along with the Senate president, explaining why it was important to go through the fiscal committee and to have this transparency. Mary Jane Wallner and Lou D'Alessandro wrote two letters to the governor. And to their two letters, they got no response. And as my dad used to say, no response is a response. Along with that, the legislative budget accountant wrote an email to the governor's council and saying, you really got to come through the fiscal committee. And again, no response. So we filed the suit in the Hillsborough Superior Court in Manchester. And the reason it was filed in Hillsborough County is the fact that Hillsborough County has 4 Superior Court judges, and Merrimack County, where Concord is the county seat, as well as the state capital, only had 2 Superior Court judges. So we knew they'd probably get a quicker hearing in Hillsborough. So we finally had our hearing this week, or last week rather. It's all starting to merge into each other. And the hearing lasted from 8 o'clock in the morning till about 10 o'clock before Judge Anderson. And the governor, one of the first things they attacked was 2 things. First of all, we had no standing, no right to bring forth the suit. We did it as the leaders of the legislature and as well as the 2 leaders of the fiscal committee. And the governor said that doesn't give you standing. Well, then we also included the fact that we were taxpayers, and under a constitutional amendment that we passed here in New Hampshire a year ago, any citizen who's a taxpayer can bring forth a suit against the government. So they went after us for that. They went after us for filing it in Hillsborough County instead of Merrimack County. And Judge Anderson pointed out that under the emergency order of the Supreme Court, anybody can file anywhere. Venue, it doesn't have any matter with the hearing. So we presented both cases. The judge was very good, asked a lot of good questions. Silverman, the Senate's attorney, represented the Senate, and Paul, oh, she's a good friend of mine too. Paul Toomey represented myself and Representative Wallner. Some people felt it was what we were doing was political and it had nothing to do with politics. But because of that, I purposely didn't want Jim Cianci, the House counsel, to get into the case because, and so we reached out to Paul. I just didn't think it was appropriate. But as I said, I received a lot of emails, especially from Republicans, and I pointed out, this is not about Republicans and Democrats. This is about the New Hampshire legislature and the people we represent and the ability to have oversight of what the governor does and where the money goes. It's something we've been doing in this state for 40 years. And if you look back on New Hampshire's history, and this will probably put a lot of you to sleep, but you go back to 1783 when the Constitution was written. The United States had just finished with an eight-year war against King George. They did not want a strong executive. We had the two Wentworths, John Wentworth, and before him his uncle Bennington Wentworth, who were not all that popular with the general public as governors. So New Hampshire especially wanted a weaker governor. You just had Andrew Lindsay on from the executive council. New Hampshire is the only state that has the strong executive council. The only other being Massachusetts, where it's more honorary. New Hampshire really has a lot of checks and balances on our governor. So for the governor to take in $1.25 billion and want to be able to spend that money without anybody looking over his shoulder, it's just so inappropriate. It's about 10% of our biennial budget, and so that's why we filed the suit, and we're waiting for an opinion from the court. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I'd be glad to answer any questions about the suit. Or
When do you expect ruling?
Jeff, the judge said very quickly he would get to it. There's a lot for him to go through. He already spent the weekend reading a lot, looking at case law and studying the RSAs. So I'm hopeful within a week there should be an opinion from the court.
Has the governor's team signaled that they will appeal?
They haven't said, but I'm quite sure they would.
Okay.
Yeah, as would we most likely.
Yep.
But it depends on what the judge does and what he says in his opinion, to be perfectly honest.
And when does the state receive the money?
We already received it. Last week, we received half of the 1.25 billion, and the other half just arrived yesterday. But we're still waiting for Washington and the Department of Treasury to send the guidelines to give the governor direction on what it can be spent for and what it can't be spent for. So that's now holding us up. The argument the governor used is it can't go to fiscal committee. They only meet once a month. We've got to meet promptly. And as Mary Jane Wallner pointed out in her letter, we can meet every day if you want. We have that flexibility and that ability. The other thing the governor told me is I don't want it to go before fiscal because the public will come in and testify, and that slows down the process. And I said the fiscal committee always invites public comment, but on the day of the hearing itself, the only ones that normally ever talk is the department heads and the members of the committee. The public doesn't have the opportunity to speak there. So there really is no reason not to do the right thing.
Has he given any indication what he actually wants to spend the money on?
No, some of it will be used to backfill the budget. He's already spent $50 million on hospitals, and which are in dire straits because of this. As we all know now, from what we've seen with the layoffs and everything else, elective surgeries really pay the freight at our hospitals. And without any elective surgeries being performed, It's been really a drain on the hospital budgets. They're all going to be showing losses. So that money will go back to that. To show that the idea of using the fiscal committee for the oversight and this advisory group are two separate things on two different streams. We, the Democrats in the House and the Senate, agreed to serve on his advisory committee, but that's all that it is. We can only advise, but it's up to the governor to make the final determination where the money goes. Yesterday, we heard from the Hospital Association, nursing homes, 3 or 4 hospitals, the nurses, the president of New Hampshire Nurses Association, the impact they're having. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from some businesses. And we want to hear from the nonprofits. We want to hear from representatives of the homeless. We want to hear from the mental health community. We want to hear from those who represent the disabled. And there's a lot of groups. We know the ones that will have a voice, and we want to make sure those that normally don't have a voice are heard and their needs are met.
Do we have any other questions for the speaker about what's happening?
Have you,
Pretty good update then. Okay.
Wow.
have you begun to think about what budget adjustments we'll have to make?
Congress is now voting on their 4th funding bill, and there's supposed to be $500 billion coming to cities and town in the state, in local communities. We're hoping that we'll get a lot of that money will come back into New Hampshire to help with our revenue shortfalls. Right now, we aren't in all that bad a shape, but as we keep going, the numbers will be less and less, and there's going to have to be some cuts. That's something, again, we want to watch and be very careful where those cuts come from. And we're hoping the money that we've already taken money out of programs such as the new secure psychiatric unit to help pay for COVID expenses. And that money's already been put back. And we want to see other monies that were used because of this pandemic, that's replenished to the budget. But we've got to look at, we have in New Hampshire, we have needs and we have wants. And it's our priority to make sure that our needs are met and the needs of the people we serve. I worry about our first responders, firefighters, police, healthcare workers. I worry about them for the mental health issues I know that a lot of them are going to be facing when this is over. It's going to hit them and make sure they get the counseling they need. That troubles me. I worry about the children. I worry about the fact that they're reporting less, has dropped 50% the abuse, child abuse in New Hampshire. And that's still going on, but it's just not getting back through the schools like it normally would. I worry about that. I worry about domestic violence. And there's a lot of things that we got to make sure that we keep our eyes on and take people. This pandemic is like throwing a pebble in a pond, and we see the big splash of those who become ill and some passed on, but there's going to be a ripple effect after. And we've got to make sure that the secondary victims are taken care of.
In addition to the fiscal oversight that you are pressing for, and wisely so in my estimation, what other elements would you see as highlighting your candidacy?
Well, as I serve as Speaker of the House, and tomorrow we Democrats are going to have a caucus, the first one from remote caucus. And I'm a Democrat, as my parents were and their parents before them. In fact, my grandfather came from Ireland, and he said I was a Republican in the old country fighting for the independence of Ireland, but in this country I'm a Democrat. But but I don't look at myself as the Democratic Speaker of the House. I look at myself as the Speaker of the House who's a Democrat. So anything I'll share tomorrow with our caucus won't be anything more that I wouldn't share with Republicans on the other side of the aisle. And I think I've kept in touch with Sharon Packer, the deputy Republican leader. We talk 2 or 3 times a week, just keeping him informed of what's been going on and what we're doing. And so when we come back, we're going to have to do a lot of work in a short period of time. And I said to Sharon just today, I said, you know, we really got to work together and put the partisanship aside and just do what's right for New Hampshire and make sure we get through all our bills and do what we need to do and have the sessions be productive and open and everybody has a voice, but get our work done and not keep anybody in Concord any longer than we have to.
I have a question. Do you have any updates about when testing might be more available for people in the state?
Yeah, I wish I did. You know, I don't know why I do it, but every night I watch the president's press conference, and it's like it's like seeing a traffic accident. You never want to look, but you do. And that's what I think of when I see the president, and it's so frustrating at times. But I'm hoping you hear something new, and now you see with Georgia and Tennessee and South Carolina opening up. The president's applauding those governors, but criticizing other Republican governors like Governor DeWine and Governor Hogan, who have been calling for more testing. Governor Hogan went out and bought 500,000 more test kits yesterday, and the president called him a fool. So I feel like Alice in Wonderland, up is down and down is up. So as far as New Hampshire, I know they're still trying to do more, but they're still limited. Even our governor went off and was very upset a week or so ago when we got the new machines in from Abbott Laboratories, but the test kits didn't come with them. And like somebody said, it's like getting a toaster and then just given a loaf of bread and told to go feed your community. Yeah. It's you just don't have all your tools to do the job. So this is the problem. And, you know, we're very fortunate in this country that we've had governors that have done such an outstanding job during this pandemic. Because if we had to wait for the president, I hate to think how bad it would have been.
Yeah.
So I wish I knew about the test kits.
Yeah.
We don't have any South Korean friends we don't know about yet.
I know. Yeah. That's what Governor Hogan did. Yeah. They're not sure now. They talked about the surge coming May 1st, but maybe it may not be quite as bad as originally expected. And we hope it won't be.
If you saw all the kids out at UNH and the beach, you'd maybe worry a little more about that because it was pretty bad on Sunday.
Really was? Oh,
playing Frisbee and out and about, doing all kinds of stuff. And the beach was, I mean, we wanted to drive along when we were doing an errand and we couldn't have our windows open or anything because there's so many people. And the ice cream shops, people sitting in the tailgate of their car, just person to person to person, all just having their ice cream.
Wow.
You'd have no idea there was a pandemic going on. Felt like a summer day.
Amazing.
The fear is Boston is becoming a hotspot, and it's leaking out into the smaller towns in Massachusetts. And if those folks flee and come north, it is likely that we will have a local surge. And it'll go into the areas where folks have their cottages, their vacation cottages.
Mm-hmm.
And those tend to be the areas where we don't have substantial medical facilities, even primary care practitioners. And so we could be looking at a second wave that would have substantial impact in New Hampshire and was not of our making.
That's exactly what happened in Vermont. People from New York State with summer homes in Vermont and northern New York went north and they brought it into Vermont, and they had a bump. So that's a big fear here, and it's a big fear now with some about opening up camping areas, campgrounds. People are going to come up here and just camp and cause problems.
It happens in Rhode Island too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their governor's done a great job down there. She really has. But like Jeff said, Boston especially really is a hot spot. And New Hampshire is really a suburb of Boston. And we've got a lot of people going back and forth even now. So just hope and pray.
Was wondering what your thoughts were on the protests that happened at the Capitol this weekend.
God, you got to wonder what people are thinking. It amazes me. I saw some of the protesters in the photos. They actually had face masks on. So, I went into the supermarket the other day, and there's a person wiping down the shopping cart with the cleaning products, to sanitize it, but they had no face mask on. And I'm thinking, it's just so counterproductive. You've got to protect yourself. But this idea, and I think that's part of the reason the governor formed that committee today to look at the reopening of New Hampshire, because of the pressure. I talked to the Republican leader and I said, so what's the biggest complaint among your caucus? And he told me it's this thing about opening up the state. They're really getting in this idea that we're seeing down south now. Open the state up, and we're just not ready yet. Hopefully soon, but not yet. Yeah. And if you open it up, people are infected is going to be worse than before. And I heard on the news.
Till there's more testing.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Yeah, and the president keeps saying we've done more testing than any other country, but based on our population of 350 million, the per capita, we really haven't come anywhere close to other nations like South Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And now they're talking about a second wave possibly coming this winter when the flu season starts. So, yeah, it's tough. But come next November, it's got to get better in this country. So that's what keeps us going.
Right.
The new elections.
Fingers crossed.
Can we end on that positive note, or does anybody else have any questions?
When are we going to reopen the legislature, Mr. Speaker?
Well, I've heard that from a lot of our representatives. When we're going back to have a House session, and I thought about those outside the State House this weekend protesting. I said, well, why do we want to go back inside and do the same thing now? And right now, we really don't have anything on our agenda. The Republicans, in a way, did us a great favor with that marathon session, of that 19-hour session. They did it to punish us, but we got all our bills done. So the only thing we have to do now is wait for committees. Yep. We're hoping by the 30th that we'll have our first executive session with the Finance Committee and start going. We signed a contract with Zoom Web. Oh, I can't think of the name now. Anyway, it's part of the Zoom, but it's a more higher security and more adaptable to the legislature for committee meetings. So we're doing it step by step, as baby steps, but we're heading in the right direction. So we're getting there. But I don't know. We may look into renting a new arena in Manchester and just spread everybody out in there and have a session. But I always wanted to play there. My parents would be so proud. But we'll just have to take it, step by step. Yeah, it's tough though. I think everybody's just anxious to get back to work and get things done. But we're fortunate. We're actually in better shape than the Senate. I think we'll have about 160 bills we need to deal with So that's not too bad. And I'm setting up a meeting with the Senate president as well as the 2 clerks and the 2 chiefs of staff to talk about when we go back, the scenario of, we got to make sure we work together and help each body and just move the legislation along.
Thanks for all your hard work and your great ideas. It's nice to know you're at the helm up there.
Well, now I realize why I get the extra $25 a year.
Nice.
It was always
nice.
a mystery, that extra 25%.
Yep.
And
Earning
now
it.
it's dawned on me. So, which I've already wasted. But it really is a labor of love.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if nothing else, I'll call it a night while I go answer emails, what I'll do. But I want to thank you all for inviting me. And thank you, Amanda. I really appreciated talking to all of you.
Thank you.
Seeing
Thank you.
everybody and
Good night,
seeing you're all
Mr.
doing
Speaker.
well. Take care, and you all
Stay
have a
safe.
good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Okay.
So with
That
that,
was exciting
is there
call, Amanda.
anything? I love the speakers and I love Andrew, so I was really excited about this. Thank you all for being here. Do we have any questions, comments, thoughts about committee or anything that anybody has said tonight, or should we call it a night as well?
Thank you for putting this together, Amanda. All looking forward to your reelection campaign.
You're funny.
Oh, I'm serious.
I just
okay. So other than that,
I just always wonder what our next steps are. The granite project thing. How can we be involved?
Good point.
Helping Andrew. What do we need to do?
sure. So Irene, and it's a great question. So Irene put in the chat as Andrew's campaign manager her email address.
Yeah.
So it's just irene@belinskynh.com. Of course, she said to follow up with any questions, but she's always looking for volunteers. And if you want to donate, I'm sure she'll take your money as well. So that's a great next step for Andrew. Next meeting, we have Dan Feltus. So if Andrew's not your style, Dan might be. I would say that find your favorite Democrat. And as Steve said, hopefully November will be a little bit brighter. So our next meeting is May 19th. Same thing, 7 o'clock. We'll do it online. And like I said, we'll have Dan, so come with your questions to be able to determine between the 2 candidates and find your favorite.
Got it.
Deb, I don't know if that answered your question. Do you want, is that okay, or do you want more?
No, that's fine. I just wonder if I'm new to this committee, so I just wonder if we as a committee, like, do things or, like write letters or I don't know. Do we do that?
I would love to have more engagement. Yes. Thank you for asking such a wonderful question. We should be doing letters to the editor. If you have a strong thought or opinion that you want to express, feel free to send it in. If you want me or somebody else on the committee to double check anything just as a second eye, I'm happy, and I'm sure anybody else on this committee would be happy to collaborate. If you want, last year we had, or 2 years ago, I guess now, we had trainings on how to write letters to the editor. We could always do that again via Zoom. We don't typically, so what normally happens is that for the first half of the year, heading into an election, we hear all the candidates. So last month was supposed to be Kelly. She is running for executive council and for Ted Gaskett's seat. She'll be joining us again in June because our attendance was a little light last month. So I want her to come again, and I want her to speak. Because we need her as our executive council. I'm just going to say it. She's our only Democrat. She's awesome. We need to vote for her. We need to help her and support her, because anyone's better than Ted. So then today, obviously, we had Andrew. May, we're going to have Dan. And then July and August, typically the committee takes off just because everyone's traveling. And then what will happen is then we'll kick back up in September and October and focus on the campaigns and what activities the committee does together to get our Democrats elected. So obviously that involves everything from the top of the governor to executive council to Senate to House. And then what we should be doing after the elections, which I will say that the Lead Dems have struggled in the past, but it's also to look at local positions as in school board, select board, zoning, anything that we have an opportunity to make change. We should be looking at those positions and finding qualified candidates for those roles. And I will say that that's never really been our focus, but that would be my ultimate goal.
Yes, that'd be great.
And each of you needs to take a look at the roster of local offices and ask yourselves, is this something I might be interested in running for?
Yeah. About school on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of important places we can work.
Now, so what I just explained was kind of how we normally work, but I'm up for anything. So if somebody has a different idea, if they want to shake things up, I would love to have, this is me being selfish again, but I would love to have, an education person or a communications person or someone to help Katrin and I really reach out and advocate and get more people to join and to grow this group and to join our, to be more cohesive, I guess. It's more of a happy and helping that grow. We've never, as I said, never been able to do local positions, so we've never had enough interest or people. So again, that's my ultimate goal, is to see all this grow. It's a wish, but
if we share some of this, I think a lot of people are interested in the governor position and that kind of stuff. So if we can share this with people too, I think that'd be really great. Get this on your social media platforms and an email to a friend. I think it's just important for us to grow.
If any of you have a friend who's interested in Dan Feltus, please bring them to the next meeting.
Yeah.
So you already have the login. I'm sorry for today's mix-up, but the login is correct now on the calendar. What will happen is after this meeting, like I said, it is being recorded. It's saved to my computer. I will download it. I will send it out via a link to YouTube that only we have access to. If you have the link, you have access to it. Feel free to share it. People need to know what Andrew and the speaker has said. And exactly what Jeff said, if you have someone who's interested in Dan Feltus or just wants to see the differences between the governor candidate, invite them to this call.
Are you going to edit the chit chat out and focus on the presentations, or just make the whole thing available?
Typically, I make the whole thing available because I think this information is important as well. I think that asked a great question of how we can get involved and how to help. And I'm hoping, and I'll leave this part in too, so those who hear this, feel free to contact me. I would love to have more help. And I'm planning on leaving this chit chat in. But I don't typically, but I think today I'm feeling fun, so we'll leave it in.
Thanks for doing this.
Come join us.
I've got a great hair today. I want to be on camera a little bit more.
Right.
Amanda, yesterday Stratford County Democrats met on Zoom, and we discussed what could. I'm a member of the Stratford County Democratic Committee, just in case other people don't know. And we discussed what we were going to do about the August picnic, which is a rather large fundraiser for the county committee. And we were pretty sure that we would not be able to actually have that happen because there's social distancing is not possible with that event at all. And it wouldn't be clear that anyone would really want to attend it, given, you know, that it's probably still not going to be resolved by that the epidemic will not be done by August. So we were thinking of ways to try and alternatively raise the money needed, and probably we would look into getting sort of virtual sponsorships for the sort of non-event, but perhaps we would do a Zoom event. It wasn't quite decided how we would do it, but I'm just letting you know we're working on trying to figure out some kind of workaround. Because we do need money for the county Democrats, for everybody running in the county. So we got to think of a way. That's it.
Well,
Sell hand
that's
sanitizer.
a great.
If anybody has any ideas, bring them to me and I'll pass them along to the county committee.
Can you get your hands on some N95s? Because that really could. Nice.
So as a side note as well, because we're all looking for money, Eric, do you have a treasurer's report perhaps we could share with the group with some exciting news?
I think so.
Exciting.
Okay, so for the Federal Savings Bank book, I put in the check, the long promised check for $500, and so now in the checking account we have $932.41.
Bravo.
We also successfully collected a penny of interest for the past however many months since the last time I gave my report.
Way to grow, Dems.
So with that said, to entice local candidates to run, it's always nice to be able to give them some money. I know Jeff and I probably don't need any for the house, but I won't speak for you, Jeff. If you want money, feel free to ask for it. But we should probably think about fundraisers for ourselves as well. Barrington, just as a side note, is also debating about their yard sale, which they always have. Apparently it's always the second Saturday of July, but I've never put that together. So they probably won't have
can order and use at home. So it's been really great. By the way, if you need some bulbs and seeds and things like that, check out Lee Historical Society. That's a different hat.
All right.
Well, thanks, Amanda.
Any other? You're
Good
welcome.
night, all.
I'm glad y'all could join. Good night.
Good night. Nice to see you.